At an art auction, I bought a painting of a serene landscape. As I admired it later, I noticed a small figure in the distance that wasn't there before. Every time I looked away, the figure moved closer, becoming more detailed, a face pale and grinning with sharp, uneven teeth. When I tried to burn the painting, the flames wouldn't catch. Instead, the figure pressed against the canvas, its hollow eyes staring at me, as if begging to be set free. It was late, the kind of late when even the streets seemed to sleep. I stopped at a crosswalk, though the road was deserted. Across from me, a figure stood motionless, dressed in black. It didn't look right. Its face was blank, smooth like polished stone. Uneasy, I blinked and looked again, but it hadn't moved. The light turned green, and I drove on, trying to shake the eerie feeling. As I passed the spot where it had been, I slowed to check again. It was gone. A chill swept over me, and instinctively, I glanced in the rearview mirror. There it was, sitting in my back seat, its featureless face staring straight ahead. My chest tightened, and I couldn't breathe. My hands gripped the steering wheel, but I dared not stop. The figure remained there, unmoving, all the way home. Everyone in town avoided Elm Street after dark. They said the fog that rolled through the street at night carried strange noises, voices, cries, and something worse. One evening, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to walk down the fog-laden street. The moment I stepped onto Elm, the air grew thick, colder than I had ever felt. Strange shadows flickered in the mist. I heard a voice calling my name, soft but urgent. But when I turned, there was nothing. And then I saw them, faces, pale and distorted, in the fog around me. "They're watching," someone whispered behind me, and I realized the voices were coming from the shadows themselves. I was out driving on a country road one misty evening when the fog started to roll in thicker than I had ever seen. As I drove through it, I saw shapes, shadows moving in the distance. When I looked back, the road was gone. I was no longer in my car, but standing in the mist, alone. The fog whispered my name. "I've been waiting for you." The shadows took form, dark figures pressing in, with faces that seemed to mimic my own, twisted into unfamiliar shapes. Late at night, I heard soft footsteps coming from the roof of my house. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the steps were too heavy, too deliberate. When I climbed onto the roof, I saw nothing, but the footsteps continued, slowly circling me. Then, I realized, those weren't footsteps in the snow at all. They were human-sized footprints, covered in the shape of something crawling, something not quite human. I tried to leave, but the footsteps were closer now, right behind me. Hiking in the woods, I stumbled upon a cabin I didn't remember seeing on the trail map. It was weathered, but inviting, with smoke curling from its chimney. Inside, I found a table set for two. The second chair creaked as if someone had just left. The fire suddenly roared to life, casting shadows that danced unnaturally on the walls. On the table lay a note, "Welcome back." When I stepped outside, the cabin was gone, replaced by thick woods and an eerie, empty silence. Driving late at night, I stumbled upon a carnival in the middle of an empty field. The rides whirred and laughter echoed, but I saw no people. I ventured to the carousel, where the painted horses seemed lifelike. As I touched one, its head turned, eyes blinking. When the music stopped, so did everything else. The laughter turned to whispers, calling my name, and when I turned back, the carnival had vanished, leaving me alone in a dark field. I was walking home one evening when I heard the sound of a child crying from an old, abandoned house. It was faint, almost a whimper, but it sounded so real. I couldn't resist. The door creaked as I opened it, and inside, the air was heavy with dust and decay. The cry grew louder, more frantic. As I climbed the staircase, the cry turned into frantic laughter. At the top, I found a room, empty except for an old, dusty cradle. There was no child, only a tiny, stitched doll staring up at me with eyes that seemed too real. And in the darkness, a voice whispered, "You found it." My grandmother's house was full of antiques, but there was one item that always caught my eye. A small porcelain doll, sitting in the corner of the room. Its eyes were wide, frozen in an expression I couldn't place. One night, I decided to get closer, examining the doll up close. As I touched it, I felt a cold, unnatural presence. Suddenly, the doll's lips shifted into a smile that wasn't there before. That night, I heard it, soft, childlike giggles coming from the corner. The doll had moved. I found a rusted key in the attic, hidden in a small, locked box. The moment I touched it, a low hum filled the room, vibrating through the walls. That night, my dreams were vivid. I saw a door with intricate carvings and heard whispers urging me to find it. When I woke up, I realized the whispers hadn't stopped. They were coming from inside the walls. Following the sound, I pried open a wooden panel to reveal a hidden passage. At the end of the dark tunnel, I found the door from my dream, the key glowing faintly in my hand. As it turned, the door creaked open, revealing nothing but shadows that reached out to pull me in. While cleaning the attic, I found an old black and white photograph tucked inside a dusty box. It was of a family standing in front of my house, smiling. But behind them, in the shadow of the porch, stood a dark figure, barely visible. At first, I chalked it up to a flaw in the photo, but something about it nagged at me. That night, I placed the picture on my bedside table and went to sleep. I woke suddenly to the sound of tapping. The photograph now lay on my bed, the dark figure missing from the background. My eyes darted around the room, but I couldn't see anything. The air felt wrong, heavy, like something was watching. There was an old mansion at the edge of town, untouched for decades. My friends dared me to go in, and I did, despite the warnings about it being haunted. As I roamed through the dusty hallways, I noticed a door that I was certain I hadn't seen before. It was hidden behind an old tapestry, and there was no keyhole. Yet, as I placed my hand on it, the door creaked open, revealing a room filled with old portraits. Everyone staring at me, their eyes following my every move. The air felt thick and my heartbeat echoed in my ears. As I stepped further in, the door slammed shut and a voice whispered, "This room has been waiting for you." A music box I found at a flea market played a hauntingly beautiful tune. But when I wound it up, the melody made me feel deeply uneasy, as if I had heard it somewhere before. That night, I dreamed of a dark, endless room filled with shadows. The melody echoed, and in the center of the room stood a figure swaying to the tune. Waking up in a sweat, I found the music box on my bedside table, though I'd left it in the living room. Its lid was open, and the melody played softly, even though I hadn't wound it. On a winter hike, I came across a frozen lake shimmering under the moonlight. The surface was smooth, almost too perfect. As I stepped closer, I saw faces beneath the ice, their expressions trapped in silent screams. The air grew colder, and a voice called out from the middle of the lake, "Join us." Suddenly, cracks formed under my feet, and icy hands reached up, clawing at my boots as the lake began to swallow me whole. While walking home, I noticed a light flickering in a high-up apartment window. Through the glass, I could see a young girl staring out. At first, I thought she was just another lonely soul, but something felt off. Her face was unnervingly pale, and her eyes were hollow, staring into mine as if she recognized me. I knocked on the door downstairs. A man opened it, his face identical to the girl's, but older. "You were never supposed to see her," he said, slamming the door in my face. Living in an old apartment building, I'd grown accustomed to the creaks and groans of its age. But the footsteps in the hallway were new. They came every night at 3 a.m., slow and deliberate. Opening my door, I would always find an empty corridor. One night, determined to catch the source, I stayed awake. Right on cue, the footsteps began. I swung the door open to find nothing. Then, as I turned back, I froze. The sound was now inside my apartment. My house was quiet, still, and peaceful, or so I thought. Late one night, as I was drifting to sleep, I saw a shadow move past my bedroom window. At first, I told myself it was just a trick of the light, but then I saw it again. A hand, pale and trembling, pressed against the glass. I rushed to the window, heart pounding, only to see nothing outside. Yet as I turned around to leave, the hand appeared again, this time inside the house. It was moving toward me, and then it grabbed my wrist. I lived in an old 2-story house, and from the moment I moved in, something felt off. The rooms would feel cold and then warm again, as if something was shifting just beyond my sight. Then I noticed the handprints on the walls, windows, even the mirrors. Tiny, dark handprints that appeared without explanation. One night I traced a handprint along the edge of the hallway, and as I touched it, the walls groaned. Suddenly, I saw a shadow at the end of the hall, looming. It was a figure with dark, empty eyes and outstretched hands. "You're not alone," it whispered. At an antique store, I stumbled upon a beautiful wooden cradle carved with intricate patterns. That night, I dreamed of a crying baby, though its face was a blur. Waking up, I found the cradle rocking on its own. As I approached, the crying grew louder, but the cradle was empty. When I tried to stop it from moving, something icy touched my hand. Looking closer, I saw tiny handprints forming in the wood, their shape pressing upward from underneath, as if something was trying to escape. Traveling for work, I checked into a hotel late at night. The receptionist warned me not to visit the 5th floor, but she didn't explain why. Curiosity got the better of me, and I took the elevator up. When the doors opened, I stepped into a corridor shrouded in shadows. Every door was slightly ajar, and the faint sound of whispering echoed around me. At the end of the hall, I saw a figure standing motionless, its face obscured. It began to move toward me, the whispers growing louder until they turned into a scream. As a child, I often heard strange howls coming from the woods behind our house. My parents would dismiss it, saying it was just the wind. But one night, after hearing a particularly vicious growl, I went to investigate. As I walked deeper into the forest, I saw movement in the shadows. Something large, dark, and fast. My heart raced, but I couldn't turn back now. I followed the sounds until I reached a clearing. There, in front of me, stood a creature covered in fur, its eyes gleaming with an otherworldly hunger. Before I could scream, it lunged, and I realized this creature had been waiting for me for years. At first, I thought I was the only one on my street, but one day I started to hear noises from the house next door. Voices, footsteps, the sound of children laughing. Yet, every time I went outside, the house seemed completely empty. One night I decided to investigate. As I walked past, I saw shadows through the window. There were figures inside, moving as if they were there but not quite touching the world around them. The laughter grew louder. I knocked on the door. It creaked open, revealing an empty, decaying interior. "We've been waiting for you," came a soft voice from within. It was an ordinary evening when I began noticing something strange. In the corners of my vision, shadows began moving. I thought they were just tricks of the light, until I heard laughter. Soft at first, then growing louder, darker. The shadows began to stretch, twist, and turn as if they had minds of their own, dancing along the walls with eerie energy. I couldn't stop them. Every attempt to turn the lights on only made the laughter grow. Finally, I saw it. A figure, faint and twisted, emerging from the shadows. It whispered, "Laugh with me." While on a coastal walk, I came across an abandoned lighthouse. Its glass was shattered, and the stairs creaked as I climbed. At the top, there was no light mechanism, just a chair facing the sea. As I turned to leave, the chair spun toward me, empty but moving as if someone had sat there moments ago. I fled down the stairs, but the sound of heavy boots followed me. Outside, I looked back at the lighthouse. The light was on, beaming toward the horizon, though no one was there. In an old house I'd just moved into, I noticed strange noises coming from the floorboards beneath the living room. It sounded like children whispering, like something was crawling under the house. I couldn't see anything when I looked, so I decided to ignore it, but the whispers only grew louder. One night, I saw something flicker under the floor, a hand with long, twisted fingers, scratching at the wood. That was when I realized they weren't children. The eyes staring up at me from the cracks in the wood were cold and hungry. I inherited an old portrait of a family from a distant relative. It hung above the fireplace, showing a smiling couple and their children. But late one night, I noticed their expressions weren't as warm as they appeared. Their eyes followed me. In the reflection of the room, the family had moved slightly, positioning themselves around the portrait, watching me. The next morning, the portrait was blank, except for the faint impression of hands pressed against the glass. An old wardrobe had been left in the house when I moved in. Its lock was rusted shut, but every night I would hear faint noises coming from inside, soft scratching like nails against wood. Finally, one night, the sound became unbearable. With a crowbar, I forced it open. Inside, there was nothing but a single, faded photograph of a family. At the back of the wardrobe, deep claw marks etched into the wood led downward, disappearing into the darkness. Storms always made me uneasy, but that night was different. As rain lashed against my bedroom window, a flash of lightning illuminated something that made my stomach drop. Handprints. Small, smudged, and pressed against the inside of the glass. The window was locked. I was home alone. Another flash of lightning lit up the room, and my eyes darted around. I was certain the room was empty, until I heard the faint sound of breathing coming from the closet. The playground had been abandoned for years. Weeds overtook the cracked pavement, and the rusted swing set swayed with the wind. Passing by it one evening, I heard something I hadn't expected, a faint laugh. Startled, I turned to see the swing moving back and forth. No wind brushed against my face, and the other swing sat completely still. I hesitated but couldn't help approaching. Sitting on the swing was a small doll with stitched eyes and a crooked smile. Its head was tilted toward me as if it were watching. I stepped back, unease rising in my chest, but before I could move further, the laugh returned. It wasn't distant this time. It was right behind me. My blood turned cold as I spun around. I inherited a porcelain doll from my great aunt, its lifelike glass eyes following me no matter where I stood. At night, I heard faint giggles and the soft tapping of tiny feet on the floor. One morning, I found the doll sitting on my bed, though I'd locked it in the attic. Its mouth, previously closed, was now slightly open, revealing jagged, needle-like teeth. Beneath it was a note written in my handwriting: "You can't leave me." In a thrift shop, I found an old train ticket stamped with yesterday's date. Curious, I took it, and that evening, I stumbled upon an old station I had never seen before. The platform was filled with people in tattered clothing, their faces pale and expressionless. A train roared in, its doors creaking open. Something compelled me to board. Inside, the passengers all turned to stare, their eyes hollow and accusing. I realized too late the train wasn't heading to any known destination. Walking home at night, I took a shortcut through an alley. Halfway through, I saw a man standing perfectly still, his back to me. As I passed him, he whispered, "Behind you." Spinning around, there was no one there, only darkness. When I turned back, the man was standing inches from me, his face a pale mask with no features. The alley seemed to stretch endlessly. No matter how fast I ran, the man's whisper followed, repeating, "You can't leave." The apartment had a view of the street below, a wide view that felt oddly comforting, like I was safe inside a bubble. That is, until I saw the figure. I was cooking dinner when I noticed someone standing at the window, staring in. I thought it was a passerby, but no one was walking in the street. The figure's face was distorted, covered in shadows, yet I knew it was watching me. The next night, the same thing happened, except this time, the figure moved closer to the window and began to tap on the glass with its long, bony fingers. And then it smiled. It all started with strange noises at night, scraping sounds coming from under my bed. I thought it was my cat at first, but when I looked, there was nothing there. Still, the sound persisted, growing louder every night. One evening, I couldn't ignore it any longer. I knelt down and looked under the bed, but nothing was visible at first. Then a hand, large and pale, reached out, grabbing onto the edge of the bed. I froze as the man's face emerged. Pale skin, wide, vacant eyes, and his voice whispered from the dark, "Now you've found me." I woke up to find a strange mark on my bedroom ceiling, black and jagged, almost like a burn. I dismissed it as water damage and went about my day. That night, I woke again to the sound of scratching. Looking up, the mark had spread, and something dripped from it, a thick, dark liquid. As I stared, a long clawed finger poked through the ceiling, followed by an eye that blinked and fixated on me.